Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Well into the night, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat was already some distance from the land, battered by the waves because the wind was against them. Jesus came toward them walking on the sea very early in the morning. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out of fear. Immediately, Jesus spoke, "Have courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter answered him, "command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." And climbing out of the boat, Peter started walking on the water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshiped him and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Morning, everybody. Like was said, my name is Clay Long. I am not one of the pastors here at New Eden, but I am very grateful to be a member. I work for a ministry called Young Life. If you're not familiar, Young Life is a high school outreach ministry, so I get to spend a lot of my time hanging out with high schoolers, and it's a real privilege. But before I worked for Young Life, and then after I was a Young Life kid myself, in the in-between time, I went to college at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Go Dogs, rough them up, as we say. They're ferocious Bulldogs, if you don't know. Samford. And Samford has this tradition that I think a lot of colleges have, but at Samford it was called Dead Day, where the Friday before exams, all classes were canceled so that students could spend all day studying, of course, for their exams, which makes sense. And so my first semester freshman year, I remember being a little worried about my exams because I'd always done okay in college or in school growing up. But my first semester of college, I remember needing the exams to go well for certain classes. And so I was planning on spending all day studying, like all of my classmates, of course. But then some of my friends came to me with a proposal. Carson Kennedy, Charlie Scott, and Patrick Thompson, they had this idea for the adventure of a lifetime. They were like, what if instead of spending all of Dead Day studying for exams, what if we drove to Disney World instead? And there are a lot of good reasons to say no. But I didn't hesitate. I was like, that sounds like a great idea. I can't wait. Let's go to Disney World instead. But one thing that you should know about Samford is it's a smaller college, and my sister went there, my big sister, and she caught wind of this, and she actually yelled at me in the middle of the Samford library about how dumb I was being and what a bad idea this was and how I shouldn't go. And ultimately she said, "I'm telling mom and dad," which is crazy considering we're both in college. Like we were adults at this point, and she snitched on me to my parents. And so I had to have a phone conversation with both my parents, and I had two separate phone calls, and they went very, very similarly. In both of the phone calls, my dad and my mom said, "Hey, I really don't think this is a good idea. Here's this reason why, here's this reason why, here's this reason why." But both of them, in their own words, at the end of the phone call said, "Listen, I don't think you should do it. But ultimately, you're an adult now, and it's your decision to make. And I just hope you make the right one." So I went to Disney World. We got a picture of it. It was awesome. It was really great. Me and my buddies, we drove down on a Thursday. We got there super late. We slept a couple hours in a hotel, and we woke up at the crack of dawn. We got there right as the gates opened. We spent all day going very, very hard at all the parks. And then when the park closed, we just got in a car and drove all the way back to Birmingham that night. It was insane. It was crazy. And listen, I'll say this. Probably not the best decision, and I don't know if I would advise it, especially if there are any parents listening. I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but I'll be honest with you. I, for the life of me, could not tell you a single grade I got on a single one of those exams. But I will never, for the rest of my life, forget the time that I went to Disney on Dead Day, because it was the adventure of a lifetime. You can take that picture down. It was great. I will never forget it. And when I read the Bible, when I read about Peter strikes me as the kind of guy that would drop everything and go to Disney. He was the wild card of the bunch. He was the one that acted first and thought second. I think he would drop everything and go to Disney. In the story that we read today, he is given the invitation to an adventure of a lifetime. An adventure even better than the adventure of going to Disney World when he should be studying for exams. And Peter doesn't hesitate. But right before this story, backing up a little bit, there was a big crowd following Jesus and his disciples, because just about anywhere Jesus went, a crowd usually followed. And at some point, this crowd got hungry. So Jesus and his disciples, they fed the more than 5,000 folks with a couple loaves of bread and pieces of fish, which is wild. That's not normal behavior. And afterwards, Jesus is dismissing the crowds. It says he made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. So they're on the shore of this lake. He sends the disciples ahead of him as he dismisses the crowd. Some commentators think that the crowd were so excited that maybe wanted to make Jesus king. And so maybe Jesus was like, if the disciples are around when that happens, they might be like, yeah, that's a good idea. We should make Jesus king. Or he had some other good reason. He sends the disciples ahead. He's like, I'm going to dismiss these big old crowds. But after he dismisses the crowds, instead of immediately joining up with his friends, it says this: after dismissing the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. If you read the Gospels, Jesus makes a real habit of finding time to be by himself, to be alone with his Father, and to pray. And if Jesus, the God of the universe with skin on, if even he needed time alone with his Father, how much more do you and I need time and quiet by ourselves with our Father? But this wasn't just normal quiet time. Earlier, right before the crowd showed up that he had to feed, Jesus got news that changed everything. He found out that his cousin and his friend, John the Baptist, had been killed. And it doesn't look like he's had a second to be by himself since. And if you've ever lost a friend or gotten news that changes everything, Jesus knows what that's like. Jesus didn't just need time to himself, but I think he also needed time to mourn his friend. And so Jesus goes up on the mountain by himself and he prays, and it says, well into the night, he was there alone. And meanwhile, the boat was already some distance from land, battered by the waves because the wind was against them. So there's a storm going on, and a lot of the disciples, they were fishermen. They had probably been on boats on this lake more times than they could count. But even fishermen sometimes get stuck in storms. In fact, a few chapters earlier, the disciples got stuck in a storm with Jesus, and Jesus was taking a nap. And the disciples woke him up and saying, like, don't you care that we're going to die? And as nonchalantly as you or I might ask somebody to pass the salt, Jesus says, peace, be still, and the storm stops. But this time, Jesus isn't there. They're by themselves, stuck in the middle of the storm, and they're alone. And Jesus, at some point, he's ready to join them. And so, you know how you normally meet up with your friends. It says this, Jesus came towards them, walking on the sea very early in the morning. That's not normal behavior. Jesus became the first person in the history of humanity to walk on water. And Jesus has already done some crazy stuff at this point in Matthew. But even for the God of the universe, I'm sure that was an adventure. I can't believe or imagine what that must have felt like for Jesus to walk on water. But I wonder if it was just as casual as you or I would say, yeah, my friends are over there. How else am I going to get to my friends? If Jesus was like, yeah, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to walk on water. I don't know what was going through Jesus' mind, but he goes to walk on water to meet up with his friends. And his friends, they don't see Jesus coming and say, oh, here comes Jesus walking on water, as one does, normal behavior. It says, when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. The disciples get a bad rap, but I feel like this is a pretty fair reaction. It's like 3 to 6 in the morning, probably. It's dark. There's probably a mist on the water. And all of a sudden, they see this figure walking towards them. I think if I were in the boat, I would have been very, very scared too. They're terrified. But Jesus, it says, immediately, Jesus spoke to them. Have courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. And maybe the sound of their friend's voice immediately put all their fears to rest. Or maybe they still weren't convinced. But Peter, being the wild card of the group, the first to act and the last to think, he speaks up. And he says, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. And I don't know if Peter was just calling Jesus' bluff, just doing a classic ghost test. Like, okay, well, if he does tell me to walk on the water, I know that Jesus can do that. So he's clearly not a ghost. Maybe it's just, that's what he's going for. He's just trying to figure out for himself the truth. But some translators actually think that it should be translated a little differently. Instead of, Lord, if it's you, some people think he really said, Lord, since it's you. I wonder if Peter immediately recognized the voice of his friend, and if he just didn't want to waste a second. He didn't want to miss out on a second of being with his friend Jesus. He wanted to be with him right away. But for whatever reason, he throws out this crazy idea, and maybe to his surprise, probably to everyone else's surprise, Jesus says, come. And maybe in that moment, Peter thought twice. Maybe if he was like, actually, this boat feels pretty good. I think I might stay in here. That seems really scary. I don't know if I want to step out after all. Or maybe he didn't hesitate. Maybe he hopped out as quickly as he could. I don't know. But whatever he was thinking or feeling, he climbs out of the boat, and Peter started walking on the water and came towards Jesus. Peter becomes the second person in the history of humanity to walk on water. And I can't imagine what that must have been like, to take that first step out of the boat and to feel something solid, and then to take another step, and then another step. Imagine the adrenaline rush going through Peter's veins. I wonder if he was thinking to himself, I can't wait to tell the boys back home about this. They're not going to believe this. This is crazy. I can't believe I'm walking on water right now. But then the story changes. It says, but when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. He's walking on water. He's having this adventure of a lifetime. And then all of a sudden, the winds pick up a little bit. And maybe he looks around and realizes how crazy this actually is. And he realizes how bad the storm is. He looks down and sees that nothing is holding him up except for water, and that's not normal. I wonder if he went from thinking, hey, I'm walking on water, to, oh my gosh, I'm walking on water. This is terrifying. This isn't right. I don't know what went through his head, but in one form or another, in that moment, Peter doubted. He doubted that Jesus was enough. Either that Jesus loved him enough to keep him walking with him, or that Jesus was strong enough to keep him walking with him. And he began to sink. But he knows enough to cry out to his friend Jesus. He cries out, Lord, save me. And immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught hold of him, and said to him, you have little faith. Why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those in the boat worshiped him and said, truly, you are the Son of God. I love this story for a lot of reasons, but especially because it is a really helpful picture for me of our walk with Christ. Because all of us, in one form or another, we know that things are not the way they're supposed to be, that this world is broken. You and I, we're stuck in a storm on a boat. I don't have to tell you, many of us have experienced all too well the brokenness and pain of the world. We've hurt others and we've been hurt by others. We know that things aren't the way that they're supposed to be. But we want to be able to fix things. That's kind of how we're wired. And so we try to make things right. If I could just work hard enough, or if I could just be kind enough, or be smart enough, or be funny enough, or winsome enough, or whatever it might be, if I could just paddle and paddle and paddle and paddle, maybe I can get this boat back to shore. Maybe I can make things okay. But no matter how hard we work and paddle, we just spin in circles. There's nothing we can do to make things right. And so some of us, we just decide, well, if there's nothing else than this, then I've just got to numb the pain. I'll do whatever it takes, take whatever I can to just make life feel a little more manageable. It's just pain management at this point because there's no life outside of this storm. Many of us, we even convince ourselves that we actually like the boat. We're like, this actually isn't too bad. Because even though we're longing for more, we know that there's got to be more out there. We settle for less. But each of us, the good news is we're given this invitation. We're given an invitation to experience an adventure of a lifetime, life to the full with Jesus. Because the reason that we have this sneaking suspicion that things aren't the way they're supposed to be is because things were made to be a certain way. You and I, we were made to walk with Jesus. We were made for what he calls in John 10:10, life to the full. It's a life where you and I were fully known and fully loved by the God of the universe. It's a life full of adventure and laughter. A lot of my high school friends, they've been sold this lie that life with Jesus is boring. Like it's something like sitting in a library. But life with Jesus is much more like walking on water. It's the adventure of a lifetime that we were made for. We're given this invitation, but we can't experience it from the comfort of the boat. And there might be a lot of reasons to sit in the boat, a lot of reasons to be scared to take that first step out. And maybe we want to hedge our bets. Like maybe life with Jesus is all right, but I kind of want to keep looking for life in these other places. So I'll maybe stick one foot out of the boat and one foot in the boat. But we can't do that. We have to be all in. And I don't just say that because Jesus has his arms crossed, disappointed that you can't do it. It's because you can't walk on water with one foot in the boat. There's just no other way of getting around it. You're not experiencing the real thing. I would say for a lot of my life, I would have told you that I was walking with Jesus, but I had one foot still stuck in the boat. I had no idea how good the real thing really was. I thought I was experiencing it. I didn't know the half of it. We're given this invitation to step out of the boat, and if we do it, we experience this adventure of a lifetime that we were made for. But the reality is, on this side of heaven, as long as you and I are sinful, storms still come. There still are storms, even with life with Jesus. And when storms come, when we get news that changes everything, when we hurt others or others hurt us, it can be easy to begin to doubt that Jesus is enough in those moments. And when the storms pick up, maybe we look around for something else to grab onto. We reach out for these other life rings, or maybe we even look back to the boat, the life that we left behind, and we think to ourselves, maybe things weren't perfect, but maybe there's something else that's safer than this. Maybe I can grab onto something else that will give me the real life that I'm longing for. We reach out for all these other places other than Jesus, but none of those things that promise to save us, none of them work. They don't help us. We begin to sink. Life with Jesus does, on this side of heaven, it includes storms. And maybe the scariest part about storms is they make you think that you're alone, that you're by yourself. But the good news of life with Jesus is we never have to walk through a storm alone again. Because Jesus is there every step of the way, and we can cry out to him when we begin to sink. And he will always be there to pull us up, to save us, to dust us off, to dry us off, so that we can keep walking on the water with him. We can keep experiencing the adventure that you and I were longing for and we were made for. But if we're honest, we like to be able to do things on our own. So maybe if we're sitting in the boat, we think, okay, I'll walk with Jesus once I've mastered the ability to walk on water by myself. That's when I'll step out of the boat. That's what I'm waiting on. And if Peter had waited to step out of the boat until he could walk on water on his own, he would have never stepped out of the boat. He was never going to magically be able to do that on his own. You and I, we can't for a second do it alone. We're not going to be able to do this on our own strength. We have to step out trusting that he is enough, that he loves us enough, that he's strong enough to keep us walking. But even if we recognize our need enough to trust him to begin this walk with him, sometimes if we're honest, we're like, okay, you can help me the first couple steps, but at some point I'd like to take over. At some point I'll be like, all right, I got it now, Jesus. I think I'm good. You can hang over there. And the reality is Jesus will let us walk by ourselves. He will. But he'll also be there to pull us up when we begin to sink, as we inevitably always will, so that he can dust us off and we can continue to experience this life with him. And I think the reason that we want to be able to do it on our own is because we want to be able to fix our own problems. We want to earn our own wins. We've got this pride, but I think also we've got this fear deep down that we have to do it on our own, that Jesus is going to be impressed by that. Or maybe we think to ourselves, yeah, maybe Jesus, he was willing to pull me up once. Maybe he was willing to pull me up twice, but I keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And at some point, he's going to get tired of pulling me up. He's not going to want to help me out anymore. So I have to clean myself up first. When I was a kid and my parents were trying to help me learn how to walk, they had this brilliant idea. I don't know where it came from, but they went to Sonic and they got a chocolate milkshake and they held it across the room. And that is literally how I started walking for the first time, because I love Sonic milkshakes. To this day, that's still true. And somehow I stood up for the first time and I began to walk across the room. It was a miracle. I don't know. I don't know if maybe they knew that was going to happen. They just knew me so well. I obviously don't remember this story. I'm taking their word for it. But I'm pretty sure that I didn't have walking nailed right away. I would imagine that I probably stumbled a couple steps on that first walk. I probably even fell. And even though I don't remember it, I'm pretty confident that my parents didn't get in my face and go, "You idiot, what are you doing? Come on, it's not that hard. Just walk on your own." And they didn't help me up and say, "Listen, I'll help you up this one time, but if you fall even one more time, you're on your own, little baby. You got to figure it out on your own." No, that's insane. My parents, they love me. They were so excited. They were so proud of me for taking my first steps. They helped me up. They gave me a hug. They helped me get back on my way and start walking again. Jesus doesn't get tired of pulling us up because Jesus loves us. In his book, Gentle and Lowly, Dan Ortlund says this: Christ does not get flustered or frustrated when we come to him for fresh forgiveness, for renewed pardon, with distress and need and emptiness. That's the whole point. It's what he came to heal. He went down into the horror of death and plunged out through the other side in order to provide a limitless supply of mercy and grace to his people. Jesus loves to heal us. He loves to pull us up because he loves us. He doesn't get tired of it. So that we can continue to experience the adventure of a lifetime we were made for. And all that's required of us to experience that adventure more fully each day is to keep our eyes on him, to keep our eyes on Jesus. And what if we could really keep our eyes on Jesus? What if we could really see things clearly? If we could see Jesus clearly, it would change everything. If we could see just how clearly he loves us, just how strong he is and how loving he is, how crazy he is about you and me, if we could look in the mirror and see ourselves clearly, if we could see his beloved, if instead of seeing imperfections or things that we're insecure about or want to change, what if we could see the giant flashing neon sign above our head that says, that's my son, that's my daughter, I'm crazy about them. If we could see ourselves clearly, I think it would change how we think, how we talk to ourselves. If we could see other people clearly, I don't think it would be so hard for me to love them, for us to care about each other, for us to truly see each other made in his image as worthy, as masterpieces. I think if we could see things clearly, it would change everything. There's this story of a guy who visited his uncle Seamus on Uncle Seamus's 80th birthday in Ireland. So he flies to Ireland, and they go for a walk one sunrise by Lake Killarney. And it goes like this. As the sun rose, his uncle stopped and stared at the sunrise for 20 minutes in silence. Then the elderly man began to skip along the shoreline with a smile on his face. Edward caught up with him. Uncle Seamus, you look very happy. Would you tell me why? Yes, lad, Uncle Seamus replied with tears coming down his face. You see, my father is very fond of me. Ah, my father is so very fond of me. If you and I could see clearly just how fond our Father is of us, I think we'd skip like Uncle Seamus just about everywhere we went. I think it would change everything. If only we could see things clearly. But it can be hard to see things clearly, and especially in storms. And keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus in the midst of storms, that doesn't mean ignoring storms. That doesn't mean when we get news that changes everything, saying, well, I'm not supposed to care about this because Jesus is good, so this should be fine. I'm not upset. That's insane. That's not at all how we're supposed to react. When we walk through storms, we get to cry out at the top of our lungs. We get to cry out for our Father with our questions, with our frustrations, with our confusion. He's not scared of any of it. We get to cry out to him, and we get to be met by the good news that we are not alone. No matter how much the storm tries to convince us otherwise, we are not on our own. Jesus is with us. He is there with us. But especially in storms, it can be hard to see Jesus clearly. There's a story I read in a book, and it said a Bahamian priest told it, but they didn't have the Bahamian priest's name. So there's a great story by some Bahamian priest. But this is how the story goes. A 2-story house had caught on fire, and the family, father, mother, several children, were on their way out when the smallest boy became terrified, and he tore away from his mother, ran back upstairs. And suddenly he appeared at a smoke-filled window, crying like crazy. His father outside shouted, "Jump, son, jump, I'll catch you." The boy cried, "But Daddy, I can't see you." "I know," his father called, "I know, but I can see you." It can sometimes be hard to see Jesus clearly, and especially in the midst of storms. But even when we can't see Jesus clearly, he can always see us. And even when we can't hear his still small voice telling us to not be afraid, I'm with you. I can see you, I'll catch you. Even when we can't hear him, he can hear our cries out for him. That we are never walking alone. But stepping out of the boat, it's a scary proposition. And I wonder if the other disciples, if they regretted not stepping out of the boat, or if maybe they thought to themselves, well, at least I didn't have to sink in front of everybody. Maybe this was the safe call after all. And maybe that's true. But they would also never be able to tell you what it's like to walk on water. Stepping out is scary. The boat may feel safe, but there is no real life to be found inside of that boat. There's only one life that we were made for. This is the 3rd time that I've gotten to speak this year, and every single time it's been a story about Peter And I've quoted a lot of C.S. Lewis because I think I've got favorites, clearly. And I was going to, this one C.S. Lewis story kept coming to mind, but I've already shared it like with New Eden recently. And I was like, I got to think of something else. But then I just kept going back to it, and nothing else fit the same way. And it just was so helpful for me. And then I remembered I don't actually work here, so you guys can't fire me. So I'm just going to tell you the story again, because even though I told it. So if you were here a few months ago, you've heard this story again. And if you weren't, this is the first time I'm telling it. You can just imagine that. But it's from one of the Chronicles of Narnia, from the Silver Chair. And there's this girl named Jill. She is scared and alone and thirsty in the middle of the woods. And she sees a stream, but sitting by that stream is a lion. And she doesn't know that this lion is Aslan, and he's a good lion. In fact, he's a picture of Jesus. She doesn't know that. She just sees a terrifying lion, which is a fair way to react. And so she's scared. She's desperately thirsty, but the only stream she sees, there's a lion sitting next to it. And at some point, the lion, to her surprise, talks and invites her to come have a sip from the stream. And Jill says this, "May I? Could I? Would you mind going away while I do?" The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at its motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic. "Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come?" said Jill. "I make no promise," said the lion. Jill was so thirsty now that, without noticing it, she had come a step nearer. "Do you eat girls?" she said. "I've swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms," said the lion. It didn't say this as if it were boasting, nor as if it were sorry, nor as if it were angry. It just said it. "I daren't come and drink," said Jill. "Then you will die of thirst," said the lion. "Oh dear," said Jill, coming another step nearer. "I suppose I must go and look for another stream then." "There is no other stream," said the lion. There is no other stream for you and I. There is no life to be found inside the comfort of a boat, because you and I were made for life to the full. We were made to walk with Jesus. It's the only place where we find the thing that we've been longing for, that we've been aching for. Otherwise, we're kind of like me at my first middle school dance, sitting on the sidelines, desperate to join in but terrified. There's a quote from a play where a character says, "Why am I afraid to dance? I who love music and rhythm and grace and song and laughter. Why am I afraid to live? I who love life and the beauty of flesh and the living colors of the earth and sky and sea. Why am I afraid to love? I who love love." From the boat, we can only experience a longing for the real thing that we were made for. This is one of my favorite stories, and this author, Caroline McKinney Carnes, she did kind of a poetic retelling of the story, and I return to it often, and so I'm going to share it with you guys. It's her version, her retelling, her kind of poem version of the story of Peter walking on water. It goes like this. Before meeting the disciples on the boat, Jesus is alone on the mountain. He walks down slowly, grinning after listening to affectionate words from his Father and soaking up the stillness after a day crowded with people and noise. His eyes sparkle as God stirs the wind and sprinkles refreshing drops of rain onto his face through the evergreen boughs. Jesus probably loves walking on the water the way I love walking on the beach in a storm. The fury of the wind and water careen ecstatically about, but he doesn't feel scared, just exhilarated by nature swirling through the air and at his feet. He's dancing in the waves while the disciples cower in fear. Peter senses this wild peace as Jesus approaches. "Don't be afraid," Jesus laughs as he sees the stricken faces and hears a barely audible whisper, "It's a ghost," from the quaking boat. "It's only me." Peter, scared as the rest, but intrigued by the peace in the voice, stutters through fear. "Jesus, if it's really you, ask me to come dance on the water." "Come, dance with me," answers Jesus. So Peter steps off the boat onto the whirling, raging dance floor. He looks into Jesus' eyes, letting him lead the first steps on the water, and for a few miraculous moments, they dance. Amazed at the wildness of the dance, Peter looks away just as the sea and sky and fish dance more fiercely to welcome him to the revelry. Fear grips him as he begins to sink, realizing his feet are anchored on nothing but mystery, moving to a rhythm he doesn't yet understand, though nature seems to know the same song that coursed through him in the beginning, which frightens and excites him all the more. "Lord, save me," he cries, and looks up to find the playful eyes of the one who he has come to love but not understand. Why did you doubt? Jesus smiles as he reaches down for Peter's frigid hand and pulls him gently into the boat. We could have danced all night. The storm slows its dance to the rhythm of waves lapping a lullaby against the small boat. Disciples look in awe on the peaceful, smiling one and their friend who is beginning to never recover from a taste of the dance. Truly, you are the Son of God, they mutter. No one else could dance like that. You and I were made to dance with the God of the universe, with our Father who loves us very much, to experience the life to the full that is walking with him. But we can't experience it from the comfort of a boat, only by stepping out in faith, trusting that he is enough, that he loves us enough, that he's strong enough to take care of the first step and the second step and every step after that. And to keep our eyes on him. And when we look away and when we begin to sink, as you and I will, just about every day, to cry out to our Father who loves us, who's there to pull us up so that we can keep walking with him, to continue the adventure of a lifetime. And I want to invite us to consider for ourselves where we are in this story. If we're walking with Jesus on the water, I want us to be honest with ourselves about what are the places that we look when the wind picks up? What are the other things that we might reach to? And what it might look like to see Jesus more clearly. And I want us to be honest too with ourselves. If we're still in the boat or if we have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, I want to invite us to be honest about what's keeping us in the boat, what's keeping us from being all in. And I want you to know the truth, that you were made for life to the full with Jesus, that you were made for the adventure of a lifetime. It's what you've been longing for. But the reality is, if you step out of the boat, if you begin to walk with Jesus, there will be storms. But the good news is that no storm is final, because he is enough. He loves us enough and is strong enough that he came here in the first place. He lived the perfect life that you and I couldn't live, no matter how hard we tried and paddled and paddled and paddled. He lived the perfect life that we couldn't live. And then he went to the cross. And on the cross, he thought of you and me. And he knew that we would sink once and twice and 3 times and more times than you and I can count. And he didn't hesitate. Because when he thought of you and me, he saw a giant neon flashing sign above our head that said, "My beloved, my daughter, my son." He went to the cross for us, and 3 days later, he came back so that you and I can dance in the rain with our Father who loves us. And we can rest assured that while we may sink, we will never drown. And while it may storm, the sun is on its way because he is making all things new. He's making you new, and he's making me new. He's making this whole world new. And there will be a day where there's no more crying or sadness or pain or tears. And there will be a dance where you and I, we don't look away so often, where we don't have to sink anymore, where the dance never has to end. That day is coming. But in the meantime, we can continue to experience the adventure of a lifetime that we were made for and that we were longing for. Hebrews 12 puts it like this. Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, so that you won't grow weary and give up.